Curado 300.
No, the reel that I sent
take off
you.
your side plate. Show your brake weight system. You're gonna have your raceway right there with the bearing.
Okay.
On, brother.
And then all you're gonna do is just pop out your spool
5,000, yeah.
and just set it off to the side.
Alright.
Probably the best thing to do when customers are learning, especially when we do it at shows, they'll go ahead and easiest way is just tell them to line up everything.
Okay.
That's probably going to be your best bet. Easiest way, take it all out, line it up, and then you can just go backwards, putting it all back in.
Okay.
That's going to be your easiest one. So I'll just go through here really quick.
Right, yeah, well.
Does it help kind of having a soft surface like that too?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people too, we always like to use just like your plain old shop blue paper towels. If you use like a cloth rag or something, it's definitely going to get dust. And
you can fit that on the
some lint may be left over. Some people use old T-shirts, but as long as these we found out to be the best, just because they absorb a lot of the grease, the dirt, and everything like that.
The 5,000 SW is a much better reel, but hey. Whatever you
we'll go ahead
want,
and take out
the screws. Don't bounce off.
Yes, like if you take a little screw and you put it up against like something dark, it kind of blends in. If you got something that's like a solid color, you're able to kind of take a look at it. So we'll just go and take off the little nut retainer for the handle.
What I'll do is I'll send you
and then right there,
that just pops off.
Yep, just pops right off. Here's your handle with the nut on it, and this is going to be a 10mm nut, and it's always going to be counterclockwise to loosen it. Now, when you have a left-hand reel, it's always going to be opposite. It's going to be clockwise to loosen it, and counterclockwise to tighten.
I mean, it'll work, but it's basically
so what you want to do is usually hold that down, the star drag, because what it is the little quick plate right there. There's a tiny little pin in there. And then it's going to have your little click plate, kind of where you can hear that noise adjusting your drag.
Oh, okay.
So that's what it is. And this is also spring loaded. So as you notice, there's a spring underneath.
Okay. Well, if that's the one you want, I'm going to see if I have it in stock.
Okay.
So we're just going to set that off to the side. Everything gets lined up.
I would use it. Well, okay. Well, me personally, I won't use a spinning reel.
And then this one, you just can take a simple little pair of pliers, or needle no pliers, or crescent wrench, and kind of just back this off all the way.
Okay.
Because this is another nut for your drag pressure plates. And it comes off with a little washer. Right there. Next, we'll continue and just go ahead and take off 4 sides of screws.
The reel I sent you, I thought would be
Is there an order to the way that the screws that you take them off?
Certain screws you'll see here, like this one has 3 different screws. The back and the top are going to be the same. The bottom's going to be a longer screw.
Okay.
And then the front's going to be a completely different screw.
Okay.
A lot of times when you have, say, smaller Curados, Chronarchs, Siticas, they're going to have all similar screws.
Well, 40 pound.
And these usually have Phillips head, where you can just kind of back it off.
40 pound. Well, 175 on that one. Is that you need a little more than that? Because I thought that would be plenty if we're gonna fight this guy and bring him in.
All right.
A 6,000 holds
here's all the screws.
275 yards.
And they are all 4.
Okay.
Next, you're going to go ahead and pop off that side plate. And there you have the inside of it.
Okay.
On top, you're also going to have your
on the ones I sent you,
2 pressure plates that are both curved. So you always want them facing each other, so one concave, one convex. So that way when you tighten down that drag, it spreads out and it puts pressure down on this inner tube. And what that inner tube does is it actually pushes down on this drag plate, and that's how you get your drag pressure.
And what you're doing right now is what would occur in a normal reel service maintenance?
Yeah, this is like a very basic reel maintenance that we teach at our seminars whenever we have a Fred Hall show, or we go to a store and we do in stores and we do a lot of basic clean and service. This is like really like a real basic preventative maintenance. to look over your reel and make sure everything's okay. You know, get some fresh grease on those gears. Check your drag washes is a really big thing. With everybody fishing braid right now, a lot of times it's always good just to do a basic Q-tip with alcohol. This is probably your easiest one, and just cleaning out that eyelet.
There's a lot of residue.
Oh yeah, that braid, you know, has been known to pick up all kinds of stuff, especially in freshwater. A lot of guys will pick up a lot of stuff.
The algae and whatnot.
Yes, a lot of the debris. In saltwater, you know, over a period of time, that salt water, you know, tends to discolor the braid, and then it kind of, you know, gets the fibers and so. Let's see. Next, take out the roller inlet clutch tube, your drag plate. You're gonna see your drag washer. This is your main gear. You got your small pinion gear, yoke springs, and the yoke that holds the pinion gear. So all those just come right off.
To tire the fish out. So you don't just lock your drag in and try to wind the 40 fish in with 30-pound line.
And there's that right there. And all these will be able to kind of just come right off.
Make him weigh less, if you will.
Okay.
And then this drag washer right here, majority of the time, sometimes depending on the age of the reel and how hard it's been fished, it'll be able to pop out. You can take a pair of needle, you know, tweezers, and it'll pop right out.
So there's just one drag washer?
That's it, just one drag washer.
Okay.
And you get a really good amount of drag pressure in it. I mean, this is the D'Artagnan 2 washer. It's a real hard material. It needs like a very minimal amount of grease. With that amount of grease, like where it's really small amount, it really grabs on that drag washer, and you get a lot more drag pressure. If you load it up with grease, and there's a lot of grease on it, it doesn't get as much drag pressure. Like the old style reels, a lot of them were clothed, and you really needed to work in the grease just so that way it was able to get any kind of drag pressure. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and take off the bottom drag washer.
Okay, sir.
And then this is the clutch plate. What it is when you go to engage your reel, clutch pawl moves in to the clutch plate, and that's what gives you your free spool. Because what it does is it actually moves this yoke spring up. So it pushes it up, and it pulls it away. Normally that's when it's engaged, and you can see how the pegs are right into the teeth of the pinion gear. When you disengage it, it pulls it up, and that's what gives you the free spool.
Okay.
So that's what that clutch plate is. And then as you turn, it just kind of clicks it back into gear.
Right.
So, and then that's the assist stopper. That's like your backup and reverse. If you're one-way roller bearing in here, ever failed, went out, you got a backup drag, just in case. Just in case something happens. So you can go and pull that out, take out your clutch plate, and there you have your basic teardown.
Okay.
I mean, you can go a little bit further into tearing out your clutch, taking out your drive shaft, you know, taking out your worm gear, taking out the supports, line guide. I mean, that's like a complete teardown. With this is a basic clean and service. You know, if customers do this, say twice a year, once a year, I mean, if you're doing it twice a year, your reels will be really good. We have some customers that went to our seminars, you know, religiously, you know, every year when we were doing it a lot. And what they do is they actually got so used to doing their own reels that what they'll do is they'll go ahead and, you know, tear it down themselves. And if they got questions for us, they call us, or if they need parts, we go ahead and send it out to them.
Oh, okay.
So a lot lot of people like to do it on their own, and you know those reel repair seminars.
I've already ordered your reel. Your reel's
one of the big
ready,
keys
so
to our
it's gonna
success
go
too, for reel repair service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's done. That's ordered.
And then down here,
yep,
we have a bearing.
Yeah, I've got the order in right now.
And that bearing is your super free bearing. What it does is it supports this pinion gear, and it keeps it in place and aligned, so that way that when that spool is casting, your pinion gear doesn't rattle around and chatter on the spool, and it causes less free spool.
Right.
So it keeps it in place, so that way you get a better free flowing cast. And then also a good way to check it is usually take like a Q-tip.
That's what I like to hear.
And just go ahead and run it around. and you can actually kind of feel it, so that way
Okay, sir. Thank you.
to see it's rough or not. And right now this one's pretty smooth.
Okay.
And usually if it's really rough and it's really grindy, you can feel it. It's always best to change it. Usually, a lot of times if you're doing just like a basic maintenance, you can take our Bantam oil that we have. It comes with the majority of our reels.
Right.
And you can just put like a tiny little drop.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Just right there.
All right, you're welcome.
And then go ahead and just kind of run it around. So that way it works it in.
Right.
And then go ahead and take your Q-tip and just run it all the way around.
What happens when you talk to an 80-year-old man? Okay, I gotta go across the street, I guess.
And you just get all the residue.
Okay.
What are we doing?
Next, what we'll do is we'll actually take out this drive shaft. A lot of them will have this bar retainer on the bottom. Due to these Curados having a bearing down there, we actually like to, I always like to take this one off. And because there's a bearing down underneath.
Okay.
And what it is that bearing, I always like to put a drop of oil. And just kind of hold on to it in place and just work it around. Just so that way your bearing's a little bit lubricated. And then go ahead and just wipe off the excess. You always want to wipe off the excess oil because you don't want a lot of oil. If you were to put oil on all the bearings and then you go to cast, you start to retrieve, that oil just gets dispersed throughout your reel.
Right.
And especially with a lot of the grease in here, it'll start to break it down even more.
The oil will break down the grease.
It'll thin it out.
Right.
I mean, you could do it with any of them and it'll just thin it out completely. But that's just the thing that we like to do, and you know, with our reels, I use like a minimal amount of grease, mainly on the gears, just in the clutch area. It's probably the best from what I found. Some people like to put a lot of grease because they think it, you know, resists a lot of the corrosion. But you know, a lot of our reels, the way they're designed, they have weep holes, so it kind of lets the water escape and get out of there. So if you have a lot of grease, it's almost like you're throwing salt water on grease. It might repel it and some of it might stay. So as it dries up, the salt crystals will just stay there, the corrosion, and it kind of just adheres and it acts like glue on that grease. So that's why I usually like to run my reels pretty dry, and you know, I always like to take off the excess oil and you know, grease certain parts.
Makes sense.
You know, I made a glove and then wouldn't let me print it out.
Next, we'll go ahead and take a look at the side plate. Usually your side plate, you know, it may be a little bit dirty. You can always take a Q-tip,
I didn't have that
just
option
kind of clean it up.
You can do the snipping tool. Are you familiar with snipping tool?
Just clean that all up. And go and take your Q-tip. What I like to do is just put a little oil around the Q-tip.
Just grab my whole screen.
Not only does it clean it, it actually kind of lubricates it a little bit. You just want to get a lot of that old oil, you know, out of the factory. They come with like a really thin, soft grease. That's just what they do, but these roller bearings usually work best when you're just like a light coating of oil or even none at all. That's the best way to, with these one-way roller bearings, you know, your infinite and reverse as they call it. So
right now, when I snip it and I say
well,
yes,
that's the basics right there.
on my desktop.
You can even oil up this one right here.
Right now it says
Put a little drop in there.
yes, it's gonna ask me where I want to put it. Oh, okay.
Just take another Q-tip and just run it around the raceway.
Do they know what they want, or him, or her, or whatever?
On the inner tube, and then just go ahead and go back in and just kind of clean it up so that way there's no excess oil laying around. And then also on your breakaways right here, your breakaways on your spool, as you notice, these are on when they're in the out position.
Okay.
And then right here, they're actually in the off position. So when these brake weights are out, that plastic is running along this raceway right here.
Okay.
And that's what gives you a little bit of resistance and cast control.
Got it.
And a lot of times, because it's metal on plastic, it'll start to get dry. It'll just go ahead and you know, it'll tend to break it down. And usually what we do is we go ahead and just add a little drop of oil
all black squad
on the brake weights.
Oh, okay.
Just like a little bit. And then what you can do is take that raceway and just clean it up. Usually a lot of times you'll have a little bit of dirt, grime, old oil,
Right.
water residue, whatever it is, and you just really want to clean up that way. If you got any dirt or debris or water or anything like that in there, you're always going to go ahead and get you know, a lot of noise. And when you tend to hear, you hear a lot of people like say, when I cast my reel, I hear a lot of screeching or a whining noise. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
You know, 90% of the time, it's always going to be your brake weights. The other 10%, you're probably looking at a bearing. If you know it's your bearing, you'll know that it sounds like a coffee grinder. Yeah.
Right.
It'll just be like a coffee grinder. All right. So next, we'll go ahead and take our main gear. We're just going to take a towel.
I swear, you give these guys
just go
orders,
ahead.
they take a mile. Guy asked me to send him a copy of a
that.
PRP label, so I sent him a copy. The next question.
And you just want to make sure that all of that is all clean.
Because I do something for you once, doesn't mean I want to help you all day, you know? Just like this car right here, Aaron Jaffer.
And there it is.
I hope he gets fired.
Nice and clean. And then we're going to go ahead and take a toothbrush and just go ahead and clean it up. And all you're doing is just taking out the old grease, taking out the dirt, taking out the grime. That's all you're doing.
They're master allocators. Here, you do this. I don't know how.
And usually I like to hold on to it with a paper towel or with the shop rag right here, just because it almost like it cleans at the same time it's cleaning, and then also it's kind of wiping away the excess dirt and the brush. Yeah, you're not putting it back. Next, let's go ahead and take the drag plate, wipe off the drag plate from all the old stuff. Take another one with the clutch plate. You want to get all that excess grease, old grease, dirt, grime, whatever's in your reel, how hard you fish it. You want to make sure that's all nice and clean. Your assist stopper, you always want to go ahead and the pawl itself usually tends to get bent when you're taking it out, and a real simple fix is just by bending them back. Just so that way it's almost semi-pinching it.
I see. Okay.
And that one's good. And just go ahead and take a Q-tip. Clean that out.
Yeah, that's what I just.
And that's an easy one. That's a really good one. Next is the yoke. Just go and clean it out. Usually you want to inspect the yoke itself. Usually you kind of look around here and just make sure that it's not shaved or chewed up from the pinion gear, because this is plastic, and then the other one is also a you know, that brass gear is just running right up on it.
Okay, so that'll be one of the pieces that might tend to get worn out.
It might tend to get worn out. More than likely, a lot of the time you're going to have your main gear and your pinion gear are always going to be a continuous, almost like, you know, they're continually being used, and they're always going to be a wear and tear part, because it is a brass material, so you tend to feel the gears get a little rough and be good. And we always recommend, like, never change just one gear. You always want to change the set of gears together.
Oh, okay.
That's what you want to do.
Okay.
Drag washer. Clean off all the old excess. Clean off that one. And you're pretty much ready to go back to reassembling. And like I said before, with this one, the line guide, I always make sure that, that's probably going to be your biggest culprit of picking up dirt, grime, basically a lot of the stuff that comes off the braided line, your mono, whatever you're fishing. You're always going to see it. A lot of we tend to see these line guides really gummed up and dirty from guys fishing a lot of algae-filled lakes, weeds, you know, debris in the water. Even saltwater guys get a lot. A lot of corrosion will be built up on there.
Yeah.
And you know that corrosion tends to build up on there, and it gets a little discolored. So.
Right. Okay.
All right, next. Time for assembly. All right, first we have thick grease, which is our Shimano Star Drag grease. And it's going to be this one right here. Mm-hmm. We actually sell it in small little containers for customers to buy, and you know, customers, you know, a lot of times at the shows we'll have extras, and you know, we got no problem giving it to you. That's one of the main things with our reels is we like to recommend our Star Drag grease.
Right.
We get a lot of reels in house that have blue, red, green. You know, even back in the day, we had a lot of customers send in reels with toothpaste. And the reasoning behind that was because it was like a lubricant, but also because of the grit material in the toothpaste, it actually almost polished the gears. So what it was is it actually made the gears a little bit smooth.
Right.
But as time went on, it made it even more rough.
Yeah.
Wore them back down.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
all right, let's go ahead and put back together the drive shaft.
Dust off the truck.
And so you generally recommend this how often?
We generally recommend, you know, if customers aren't really comfortable with sending it in, we usually recommend about a year.
Okay.
If customers are doing it at their house, we have customers who do it like twice a year. You know, just because they like taking it apart and making sure their reel functions properly. They just want to make sure everything is working in there and it's good. But yeah, generally like every year is good to send it in. Or actually, if you can do it yourself, every year is probably a good rule of thumb.
Right.
But you know, like I said, some customers like to do it twice a year just to make sure everything's on the up and up on their reel. Next, you're going to go ahead and take the assist stopper and the clutch plate, and you're just going to put it back together. What it is usually those right there will go ahead and kind of go in between the two little claws on the assist stopper. And then you're going to have your plate right here with the post. You're just going to go ahead and slide that back on over.
Okay.
Just so that way it
Not working. Brand new bit runner.
goes back in. And then it'll go ahead and just sit in place. You just always want to make sure it sits flush on this drive shaft, and you'll be good. Next, we're going to take our drag washer. And like I said, with these drag washers, you want like a really light coat. I mean, there's like barely any on my finger. You just want like a really light film. And just kind of, I usually like to just kind of dab it on there. Usually a lot of guys will just rub it on there, but I like to dab it just so that way there's like a little bit of drag plate. You're going to have one side that's going to be facing up, and the other side is going to be kind of in. You're always going to want to have the drag plate with the outer ring facing down against it.
Okay.
You always want that bump facing up, so that way as you're pushing down drag pressure, it expands and it pushes more drag pressure down on that drag washer itself.
Gotcha.
On the roller clutch inner tube, you're going to have 2 ears on it, and it'll fit right into the 2 little slots on top of that drag plate.
Okay.
Just like that. Next comes your side plate. When you put your side plate on, because you're going to have a little bit of resistance on the yoke spring itself, you always want to, when you assemble it, the roller clutch inner tube will go inside the roller clutch itself, and as you push it down, you want to hold it down because of the pressure from the yoke springs.
Right.
So once you're holding it down, it'll set in place and you'll be able to see it kind of seal itself out. Sit nice and flush. From that point, I usually like to put in 2 screws. Top and bottom one would be good. And then it kind of holds it in place.
Okay.
Next, we're going to put some more screws in. And you just got to remember which order goes in where on each one.
Right.
And that's why it's always good just to line up everything and kind of...
Do you, so you don't oil the screws?
I don't oil the
Some people
screws.
I've seen
Some
do that.
people tend to... What they'll do is they'll take the threads and they'll go ahead and, you know, put a little grease on the threads. You know, from my experience and what I've seen here throughout the years... it doesn't matter. If it's gonna corrode, it's gonna corrode.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I've seen, you know, several other real repair services. They like to put grease on there, kind of just to seal it out. But over time, it'll tend to break down, and you know, as you're fishing it, it'll kind of get away, and you know, it'll still corrode. You know, nothing's really impervious to the saltwater environment. It's a very harsh environment.
Right,
I mean,
right.
but as long as you take good care of your reels and you're able to wipe it down and not hose it off and just take like a light mist to it and just take care of them, and you know, after this, you know, be able to service your own reels, you won't have any problems at all. Next goes on the drag plates. Like I said, with the pressure plates, they always go concave, convex.
Right.
One up, one down. Next goes your flat washer. On these ones, majority of these ones, they'll have one side that just is a copper, and then another side is kind of like a gray felt side that's a metal washer. And I usually put how they always have it is a copper side up and the felt side facing down.
Okay.
On this one, you'll notice there's a little groove on one side, and then the other side is flat.
Okay.
You always want the flat side facing into the pressure plates and the drag itself.
Okay.
Because where it's going to sit is this drag,
That
spring is going
right.
to
That's
kind of
what-
sit down.
That's what the groove's for.
Yep. Assemble that.
Okay, so what I want you to do, Peter, when you get your reel, hold your spool. Okay, hold the spool down, and then put your fingers on your line, and you'll be able to clearly be able
Throw
to
the spring on.
the line is slipping on your spool. The whole
Next comes your
spool
star
line
drag, and as you notice, there's a little
on your spool.
perfect location where it sets in the star drag itself.
What if you change
So
what?
usually I just kind of set it down and just kind of turn it
Yeah.
until it kind
Not
of sets in place.
Or, like you use fluorocarbon or whatever. You don't have to, but the way
And there it goes. And then you just got to hold it down with one hand.
Okay.
If I had a third hand, it'd be even better. Next goes your little click plate. You always want the little indentations with the round dots facing into that tiny little pin.
Right.
And that's kind of what gives you that noise of the clicking noise, so that way you know how much drag pressure you got. Next comes your handle.
I don't know why, but that just feels comforting to
Yeah,
feel that
it
little
does.
click.
It does. Next, go ahead and just hold that down.
right here, I'm sending.
Goes your 10mm handle nut.
It's gonna be sent out today. Probably about 5 days.
Tighten that down. Take a wrench. I usually just like to snug it up. You don't have to do it like super tight, but you just want it snug.
Right.
Were you ever using
And usually the best on these, the way these retainer nuts are designed, you either want a point
So what happened is after a few casts, after a few times
of the handle nut, or the flat side facing the threaded hole for the handle screw cap.
Okay.
So this one will just adjust a little,
for a little bit when you first did it, but after casting and retrieving
and then it'll just sit like that.
Okay.
And then you're just going to take your handle nut cap, and when you put it down,
Then it lines up.
it lines up perfectly.
yeah, that would be like on a bait casting reel.
Next,
Because they have
I always like I said, I always like to make sure that everything is nice and clean, especially in the free spool. You know, I think you can never get enough free spool. I mean, the farther you cast, the better
Sure.
your chances. So I always like to kind of clean out the frame, just right where the spool kind of rides in. The trick we do is you take a Q-tip, take off majority of the head of that Q-tip, the cotton,
Yeah, it's all we have to do with the line. So if you got a
So you want
line, when you use
just barely enough on there.
Alright. Alright, Peter. So, nope.
Next, you're going to take some rubbing alcohol.
Yeah, no problem, man. If you have any more questions,
You're actually going to shove it down in that pinion gear where the spool shaft goes through.
Tyler.
Now what you're doing is you're cleaning that out, and because it's rubbing alcohol, it's going to evaporate and you're not going to have any residue left over.
Yep, feel free to call whenever.
And then you're going to take your spool shaft, you're going to wipe that off free and clear. Grease, oil, debris, whatever it is. Spool shaft, the rim of it on each side. You don't want anything touching, nothing to resist. If it was like a continuous, you know, in some applications you're going to need grease because it's going to be a continuous slow roll. It doesn't need a lot of free spool, but because you're casting the spool and it's going so fast, you want no resistance at all. No oil, no grease, because that'll just slow it down even more.
Okay.
Next, go ahead and throw your spool back in.
Because he called me, he's like, I know that's not the problem.
Take your side plate, screw it back on. Next, what I like to do is I like to take a little bit of oil and add it in each corner of the worm gear itself.
Okay.
What that is you got metal and you got a plastic bushing. You know, over time it'll tend to break down, and it just needs to be lubricated.
So it just extends the life on
Yep, it just extends the life, and then you just go ahead and kind of work it in. So it's all nice and good.
You're going right after work, right? San Diego?
Tighten down the drag, check your drag. Give it a couple spins. And that's it. That's your basic one. And you're ready to fish.
Excellent.
That's it.
All right.